Hey, so this is kind of bored, um, and I was making some tokens, and I wanted to show everyone how I did it, how I do it. I make a lot of tokens, particularly for A Song of Ice and Fire, right? And so this is my process. So I'm going to do a screencast for everyone. Oh my! All right, so you should be able to see my screen right now. I use three programs mostly. One is simply Paint. I use that to do cropping and some other um, things that I need, sometimes resizing and scaling. And I use Inkscape. Inkscape is really where I do a lot of my lettering, a lot of my um, token um, border uh, creation, and I use GIMP. Um, so I guess the first thing I'll show you is kind of how I make a token border. So if I go into my handy dandy, um, just bear with me here. So so I've made a lot of these into tokens over the years. Let's just use something simple, not a big deal. Let's do, and a lot of these are done, so it's whatever, right? But we'll do them again just to show you. So let's use this House Butterwell sigil. So basically, what I do in these, the first thing I do is, well, I get the art obviously, and then I have to scale it. That's the or I cut it first, crop it. Like if I had an image that was too big or whatnot, I would obviously crop it to get kind of where I want the border. So if you look at this image, right, you can see that essentially I know the outside is going to look something like this, right? If I have some image that doesn't, kind of meet what I want the border to kind of look like, I'll cut specific parts of that image so I get those when I know I'm going to create the border. So let's go ahead and do this with the House Butterwell. So I'll edit this with GIMP. I always use GIMP for this process. There's one reason, and I'll show you why. There's two reasons actually. So um, the first thing, always, this is too small, right? I start my tokens to be 400 by 400 pixels. So I'll scale it to that. Always, I can never, you almost never use this, right? Because that will scale it incorrectly. So I scale it to 400, 400. So now I have an even square. Okay, so the next thing I do is I'm just going to add alpha channel if I need it. Doesn't look like I need it in this case. So I use selection tool, rectangle, select. So now I'm going to choose the width of my border. So let's say usually what I do is I make it 25 pixels by 25 pixels. Now it doesn't have to be exact because I just am hand holding it here. So 20 by 24 by 24. And you can see that in the bottom left hand side on my screen there. And I'll go all the way to 375, 375. So, and I just get it right about where I want it. That's good. And then I'll delete everything in the middle. And so now I have a token border and I can save this and you can see the middle is transparent. So I have to save it as a PNG file and that's what I would do. So that's how I create my token borders. Okay. So, and that's, it's very simple. So I don't need that one. I'm not going to save it. And I have others. So the next thing I do is I take these token borders and I create two things. The first thing I have to create after that is I open it with Inkscape and I create the text. So if I open, let's just use House Redman, it's fine. So I've opened it and this is what it looks like in this space. Now it wouldn't have this text here typically. So I'm not going to save this, but what I'd normally do is I would come in here, obviously just grab this and say House Redman. Okay, so what I would see is something like this every time. And I would select it. All my tokens use GSL Ancient, so I select that font and I apply it. Okay, and so now I get something like this. And I usually just take it and I drop it down here and just kind of scale it across the token like that. Obviously, what I have is I have a it's just black, right? It's always going to start as black. So I select the text again, and I come up here to fill stroke paint and stroke style. So here is just simply where I, pick what colors I want to use out of my wheel. I always am going to use stroke paint, and let's just say I use green. Obviously not. So you're going to see something like this. Now I'll kind of eyeball it and say, you know what? I think I want I want it thicker. Usually I'm definitely doing thicker than 1. So I do the width of 1.5 there. So this is how I get this. And then what I would do is I would save this, and I save it as a SVG file. Okay, so here's all the ones I have currently built. So in this my folder, I have SVG files and PNG files. PNG files are my normal token borders, and the SVG files are with text. Okay, so we are obviously not going to save that, so let's just close that so I don't accidentally do it. Okay, so here is a token I made of Auric for an upcoming game, and you see I didn't do a real good job, right? I kind of did it rushed. I just threw it on top of the image because the hardest types of images to mess with are the vertical images. So they're narrow and vertical. They're not near squares. So two things happen. When you resize them to be a square, it kind of alters the way the image looks. Sometimes it's in such a minor way that it doesn't matter. Sometimes it makes it look like crap. So that's the first problem. The second problem is if the image is small enough, then you have a problem where you're putting the token kind of on top of the image and it kind of smushes it, which is also not good. So really what I have here is I have a smushed image. Primarily, that's the problem. I mean, it was probably resized a little bit as well and might have altered, how it looks, but it's not that bad. So let's go back here. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do to fix this is I'm going to first, so I have an image here. So this is what I would do. I'm going to open up a new paint window, and it's going to give me a blank image. Perfect, right? So I'm going to open Auric. I think he got overwritten. This is the base Auric picture. I'm going to open it with paint as well. Okay, so now I have this Auric picture, okay, and I have this bigger object over here. So what I do is just copy this one and paste it into here, okay? So what I'm going to do is kind of eyeball where the border would be. So I will essentially do that and then kind of pull this in a little bit. Yeah, pull that in a little bit. And check it out. Now that's not enough of a square for me, so I'm going to back out. So let's back out. Let's paste it in again. All right, so one thing you have to do is you have to kind of make it a square, because if you don't, then you're going to have, problems. And I don't think I'm going to be able to do this as much of a square as I would like. Obviously, there's reasons for that because I'm basically adding to all sides, which I wasn't thinking about right there. So you're still going to have a more vertical image. But what this is going to do, this is definitely going to help from the smooshing, right? So for sure it will do that. So let's save this as not in Amber's folder. Let's do it in Auric's folder. Auric. Work progress. All right, so we did that. So now we're here. So now what I'm going to do is I actually am going to resize it. So you see it's a pretty big difference there. Let's see how it looks when I resize it, see if it looks kind of odd. And I think it kind of does. So it's really hard to fix that. There are ways that you can do it. So I could make it wider on this side, but then you ask me what happens to this inner image, and that's really the problem, right? Um, so there are things we can do. Let's try some. So let's paste this in again. So what I can do now is I can take the corners of this image and stretch it. So if I take a corner of this image, what it's going to do is it's going to stretch it in a way that is more symmetrical. See? So now see I'm in get smush it again. So let's see. Well, crap. Here we go. Let's see. So if I start messing with the other one, what it's going to do is going to give me issues. So I've got to kind of start with this side and then pull it here. Okay. So that's more and more this way. But I don't want to go too high, because if I too high, then I've done exactly the one thing I don't want to do, especially on the top, right? And this happens a lot when your images are cut off right on top of the head, which is irritating because you get this effect where the border kind of like goes over their head and doesn't really look very good. So now I bring this in. So this is more of a square, right? In general. The problem is doing this with paint. I can't reselect the image, right? So what I'm going to do instead of this is me just playing around right now, because it's never like, you're never going to know. So I'll go back to this base image, and what I'll do is I'll grab it and just go like this. That didn't work. Yeah, it's just pulling the underneath of the image. But if I resize it here, you'll see what happens. It's going to look odd. Right? You see how that's kind of distorted the face, made it kind of look fatter. So what we're trying to do is we're desperately trying to cut down on some of that. You'll never be able to get it perfectly where that's happening. So really the way to do this in my case is to come down. Because if the border comes over top of this, I don't really care so much, right? The border on the bottom is not as big a deal at all. So now that I have realized that, let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to bring it down. Okay, yeah, it made it bigger. Unless it cut it off, and it did cut it off, which is not ideal. So let's try it again. So let's do this. Let's resize this. Let's make it 600 by 600, just so I have some room to play around. Paste. Here, take him, really pull it out, right? So at least it's all symmetrical and you're not. All right, so I think that's probably as good as we're going to get it. That border should be good enough on top without leaving space. So now we're going to resize. It's pretty close now. It's not too bad. So let's save that. You can see it's a little bit more grainy, right? This is what happens when you make an image larger. It's always going to get a little blurrier. You can see it's quite a bit more fine detailed there. So I've done that, so let's see how it works. So let's go ahead and open this image with Inkscape, and we'll pull up the Dane, House Dane image for Ulrich here. So we open, We go to Dane. Now you can see kind of both the way this looks. The Dane border, I've already done this before. So I have the House Dane image here. I select all and all layers. I copy it. I come back over to Auric and I'll paste in place, and it worked. So you get a little bit of a problem on top. What I can do actually is, in this case, I can pull down the back and kind of look at it. I can't pull it down too far. This is pretty close. Yeah, it doesn't like it because it is so close. So what I can do is I can kind of pull this off and make it a little bigger. It's also another trick. All right. Make it a little longer. Kind of restores some of the, can I get it down any further? It's really, I can't. So you can do things like this if you want. Don't know that it's necessary. But actually I kind of like that a little better. Makes it look a little bit more like the real thing. What I know it's going to do is it's going to make his face impacted by the lettering. So I can go up a little bit, kind of get rid of that somewhat and get it close. I know his, and I'll go ahead and put his name in there to see kind of how the letters look. Auric. So this is going to be a pretty easy one as far as that goes. It really gets hard when it's a Y or something like that, because a Y will go off the token border, and so then you have like a little bit of a impact there, because you have to sit the words a little higher if you want that to actually show for the most part. So I think this is a pretty good representation. I think it's a lot better than what we had last time. So if I look at what we had last time, it's this, right? You can see that's a lot more impactful on the top of the head. On the lettering is up on his chin, right? If I look at this rendition, you see that it's just at the top of his crown, which I really can't make that any further away, even if I went back and redid the first touch-up, and that's because there would be white space in between. So that's pretty much perfect, honestly. And the lettering is, I don't think it's particularly any smaller than this earlier lettering. I really don't. I just think that there's more bottom. Like you can see if you look behind the lettering, kind of, you can see the nape of his neck, or not the nape, whatever you call the front side. And if you look at the old picture, it's pretty much covered. So basically, he is more accessible in this one. So I think that's a pretty good job. Hopefully Rivers agrees. He asked me to redo it with very, very valid reasons, because I don't think it was a very good shot the first time. I think this one's a little better. You see how it's a lot of an art to making it look okay. There's some science to it. I have a process where I'd always go through these steps, depending on how much the image is needed to be edited. If I have a good image that, has a good top to the image and a good bottom, and I can easily square it if it's not a vertical image, then this is not really necessary. It's just easy. I just make a box around the head, try to make it as close to symmetrical as I can, and I'm pretty good at that usually. And especially when I crop it, I can easily see what it looks like. So I think this one's a lot better than the last one. And yeah, that's how you do it. And those are the hardest ones to do. The images are actually more vertical, and it's hard to make a square out of it. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I will save it. You always save these as PNGs. So I'll save it as a PNG. I usually, I'll save it just over this one, because we're definitely not going to use that one again. And replace. And so you'll see all this extra stuff at the bottom just gets cut out. So I'll go back to the actual image file, and here it is. And so this is the new Auric. You can see it's definitely the different one, right? He's got no text on his chin, a lot less scrunched. Pretty decent rendition for at least keeping the length of the face. It's not really possible, honestly, in that situation with the room we have on the outside. What it would have to do is make the borders a lot thicker, and put a lot more white space. It's not perfect, right? But if you look at this versus the original, which we'll look at that again, you can see it's a little different, right? But yeah, if you look at him side to side, his face is definitely more fat, I guess you could say. But yeah, in instances like this, it's very difficult to keep it all, unless I want to cut it like, I mean, even if I cut it at the bottom of his chin, there would be no way to keep it a perfect square. And then, of course, you cut it at the bottom of the chin, and then you have white space. Even if you fixed it like I did earlier, you would have a lot of white space underneath, and then that white space would show. Now you could do something hokey like fill it with a color, but that would look pretty shitty probably. So this is kind of how I do it usually. I mean, if you never saw this image, if you never saw that image, I think this one would look fine. You'd say, it's maybe just a touch blurry if you're really being picky about it. But yeah, so I think that's how I do these. And yeah, I have tons and tons and tons and tons of tokens that I've made. So yeah, and the funny thing is I typically do remember what images I've used for other characters, and so I try not to reuse them. It's kind of strange. I don't know how I remember it, but I typically do. And so I don't reuse images at all. I don't think I ever have. Now I have between different games, right, that are not in the same universe. Like this is the Shattered Kingdoms. I could use this in another game, perhaps. And so here's one thing that the way I kind of build these like I do, right? So why do I have just a border without the name? Well, as a PNG file, not as SVG file, because SVGs I could just change the name and then okay, House Dane, I plug it on. Well, number one, if this is like a NPC or enemy, I might not want you to have a name there. It might not be necessary. Number one. Number two, it might reveal something I don't want it to. So instead of going into SVG and doing it this way, I can just take the PNG file and I just do that with GIMP. I'll just do a GIMP file and I'll just do kind of the same thing, or I can do it with Inkscape too. It doesn't matter. So there's that, and then I usually keep this background image. If you look at Auric, what I have here, I have this image too, which is the exact same image as this, only not with the token border. Now this has this, whatever. So if a character would switch sides or need a new border, I could put this on here. I don't have to go over top of what's here, right? So if I didn't have this file and I needed to make him have a different token border, I'd have to redo this completely 100%. So I usually keep this file as well, and not with a token border on it too, because if I put a token border, then the new token border has to be the exact same size or bigger, or it's going to look weird. So I usually keep this blank image out here. And I usually just name it, I don't usually keep this image. This image does nothing for me anymore. So usually what I'll do is I'll delete this one and I'll name this one. I'll name him the original file. And so that's how I do it. This is actually, so you can see this is the Dane image that I started from to make the token border too. I was just doing this because this is actually a new one I did. So yeah, that's how I do it. If you have any questions about any, of these programs, like I say, Inkscape is very nice for text. GIMP is pretty standard. It's really hard to use, and if you don't know what you're doing, it's free. And then, of course, Paint, which is just easy. So, yeah, thanks for everybody joining in. I'm going to stop sharing this now. All right, see you later. Thanks.